The Tanchjim Bunny DSP is regarded by a lot of people as one of the better IEMs in the $20 or 1,200 peso price range. Now, a lot of people will hear that and call it cheap, but as a broke college student, $20 is equivalent to me saving every penny I get for a month and a half. So, is it worth not eating and walking home for? Well, that's what we'll find out. But first, what's my preference in sound? Well, I like a neutral bright tuning with a slight sub-bass boost, so the tuning on these are pretty close to my preference. Now, volume-wise, I typically use a DAC and an amp dongle like the JM6 Pro from J-Cali, so it's usually at around 40 to 55% indoors and 60 to 80% outdoors. And with the Bunny DSP, I usually have the volume at around 55 to 60% indoors or 75 to 80% outdoors, so the chip here is not all too powerful, but I'm happy to note that despite needing a louder volume, it does not actually have any noticeable distortions in the sound. I'm also using the medium-sized tips with the wide bore which came with the Bunny, and in that regard it's good. So since you guys really wanted me to try this, I'm setting my expectations here a bit higher than usual, as this has been one of the most requested IEMs from you guys. So if you're ever interested in seeing a specific IEM review in the future, please tell it to me in the comment section below, and make sure to subscribe when a poll is up so you can vote for which IEMs that I go for next. I always listen to you guys. Moving on to the accessories, you also get a pouch, 6 pairs of silicone ear tips, with 3 pairs being wide bore and the other 3 being a regular bore. There's also a waifu postcard right over there that serves little to no purpose besides from looking good. The IEMs and cables themselves already come pre-attached in a separate container, which, it might cause some issues if shipping gets a little too rough, but thankfully the box is sturdy enough to handle typical bumps and drops as evident from the stress marks right over here. Now, cable-wise, this felt stiff upon first handling. It holds memory, but there is pretty much no cable noise while walking, although I do have to say that the housing material used on these will yellow over time, so just watch out for that. And on top of that, just take note that the 2-pin 0.78mm connectors are longer than what you typically get on cables in general, but it won't be a problem here as there are contact points on the sides of the actual IEMs itself. It also has a mic and some controls for play and pause, in which case, here, have a listen to the mic.
Mic test, Tanchjim Bunny minus 10 dB while acting. Tanchjim Bunny DSP, microphone while walking outdoors. And under normal circumstances, this is how it would sound like while walking with it.
Build-wise, it practically weighs nothing at 24 grams with the cables, and I also find it to be pretty sturdy despite being mostly made out of acrylic, with the nozzle right over there and the faceplate being made out of aluminum, which means that you can potentially use this for exercise and commutes without worrying too much about the humidity. Now, shape-wise, Tanchjim actually modeled this around the silhouette of a bunny, and that said, it's not going to be for narrow, average to small size ears like mine, as this part right over here is always touching my ears, where I feel uncomfortable after an hour of using these. And in terms of sound, this really doesn't disappoint. It's right up my preference for like the sub bass, where it's deep, grumbly, and is something that I generally feel more than I hear. On which case, Tanchjim has a diagram here that shows their acoustic maze structure, which is kind of similar to how the insides of a subwoofer looks like, so that might be the reason as to why the bass hits are felt more than heard. But with that pretext, despite having a bit more bass than say the Arturia Hexa, it's not of a higher quality where it doesn't feel as fast or premium. Imagine it like a JBL speaker versus a proper speaker monitor with a sub. The JBL will have that extra thump and punch for bass, but it won't sound as good or as precise as the bass produced by the industry-grade monitors and subs. Although, yes, you have to tame your expectations here, as the Hexas is literally 4 times more expensive than the Bunny, so it should have better bass. I just simply use that as an example, as the tuning here is quite close to the Bunny. Mids-wise, it strikes me as a perfect balance where it's neither recessed nor forward, but I do have to take note that male vocals feel lacking in warmth and female vocals lack a bit of timbre, especially in songs like Adele's Hello and Rolling in the Deep, where I'm expecting to hear a fuller, louder and beefier intro with goosebumps-inducing highs for the chorus. I don't get that here, unlike say the Chu 2 or the wan'er 2s. Now in terms of the treble, as someone who finds the so-called smooth 7Hz 02 to be a bit shouty and sharp in a lot of tracks, the Bunny does not disappoint. It has enough treble that makes chimes and violins as well as pianos really well represented in such a way that it won't be quote-unquote sparkly, but it is still going to be sufficient and fun to listen to. One gripe I did have about the treble is that I'm wishing for a bit more bite, a bit more brightness to really let crunchy guitar riffs like Black Sabbath's Iron Man or AC/DC's lead singer Brian Johnson to really stand out of the track. Now technicals wise, these are not going to punch above the price range where the soundstage and imaging are good enough for games with a lot of horizontal sound cues just like say Valorant, but will generally struggle in games like Rainbow Six Siege or Apex Legends where there's a bit more like vertical sound cues and there's going to be a bit more of an expansive map involved in those games. In which case, I'd say that this is more of a tie with the Moondrop Chu 2 where you can game with these and get relatively good sound cues which are also relatively accurate, but just don't expect it to be pinpoint accuracy. On the other hand, separation and detail retrieval as well as the speed is where the Bunny really shined, on which I find that these can handle the chorus of Orange by 7 decently well, where it'll still sound relatively mushy and messy but not as messy as other warm sounding IEMs. In terms of the detail retrieval, it reveals a lot more of the bow movement and lifting sounds in pieces like Back Cello Suite number 1, as well as like minor nuances and details that I don't typically get with other $20 sets in terms of London Music Works test drive. Despite that though, it's not going to reveal new details or sounds in your favorite songs, but it does do a pretty good job at showing more details than say something like the Tanchjim Bunny 2. That said, these are what I'll consider as an all-rounder set where anyone who buys this will generally be happy with their purchase regardless of use case, but just don't expect to be blown away by this too much. What prevents me from really making this as my baseline for the $20 IEM bracket are going to be the shape and the sound, on which sure these are more on the neutral end of tuning, so this might come as natural to you guys, but it feels lacking in a lot of tracks. Now that's not to say that if there's like neutrals I'm expecting a bit more, but when you consider stuff like again the True 3 Hexa, which is by the way literally on another league compared to these, so it's compliment that I'm even comparing these to the Hexas. However, I would say that the good news here is that these are DSP. This means that you get an app integration, and compared to the Moondrop Link 2.0, the Tanchjim Center is a much smoother experience on top of like getting custom tuning options for popular mobile, PC, and Switch games, 5 official preset tunings options, an EQ forum where you unfortunately need an account to download EQ presets from, a 5-band EQ with the frequency, gain, and Q values clearly shown, and a microphone gain setting. Overall, the Tanchjim Bunny DSP is a well-packaged IEM that offers a lot for the price, where all subjective criticisms that I really have onwards from like tonality to technicalities as well as even gaming performance can be tweaked by a EQ directly from the Tanchjim Center app. Now, will I recommend this over the Chu 2? If you're gonna take this to face value where you won't really download the app to play around with the sound, then no. That said, I place the Bunny DSP at a B- tier where if anything really, you're going to want this if you want a more neutral sounding set. You want a bit more of the bass but you don't want to get to the level of the Chu 2s, and you don't really like the treble of the Chus as well, or like the wan'ers or the 02s just like me. This is a nice in-between where I'd say that this is a very strong contender, and in which case, this is again the Tanchjim Bunny DSP. My name is Charles. Bye.